Good morning. On behalf of the Public Foundation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the United Nations SDG Lounge, hosted by the Public Foundation in partnership with Deloitte Digital and the United Nations Development Program. My name is Daniel Wilkins, and I'm the Executive Director of the Public Foundation. Also, thanks to We Don't Have Time as the broadcast partner for our live program, brought to you live from Cannes Lions, the Festival of Creativity, the largest and most significant annual gathering in the creative marketing community. Today is the final day of the United Nations SDG Lounge, where we will explore the fundamental roles organizations can play in the global drive for sustainability. We will hear from marketing executives, creative leaders, and UN officials on how they advance brand collaboration opportunities for a sustainable future and the success behind great partnerships, collaborations, urging for climate action now. At the midpoint mark of implementing the SDGs, we explore new and inspiring ways to transform through collaboration. It's my pleasure to moderate the first conversation with Nika Henry, head of the UN Road Safety Fund. Good morning.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Good morning, Daniel.
So let's get started. Why was the UN, or why did the UN create the Road Safety Fund to begin with?
Well, the UN Road Safety Fund was created just about 5 years ago because of the increasing numbers of road traffic deaths and injuries across the world. We were seeing that the direction of travel was going in the wrong direction, starting in about 1990s with 1.2 million people dying across the world. We're now at 1.35. So this is the main reason that they created the fund, as a way to help to channel some road safety expertise to some of those countries that are suffering from this the most.
Okay. And just how big of a problem are unsafe roads globally? And do these issues impact some communities more than others?
Thanks for the question. It's a huge problem just because of the sheer numbers. So because we have 1.3 million people dying every year, that's about 24 seconds. Every 24 seconds we have someone dying from a road crash. It means that it's a humongous global public issue. But it also is, inhibiting how we're performing on other development priorities. So when you think about safe journeys to school, we've got road traffic injuries being the leading cause of death for kids over 5 years old. And many of these are happening in the school zones, on their way to school or on the way back from school. It's also impacting things like clean air. When you think about the quality of some of the used vehicles that are also unsafe on the roads and being pollutant at the same time. And there are many other issues that it touches, including, decent growth, economic growth, because the statistics are telling us that in developing countries, road traffic crashes are causing a loss of about 3 to 6% GDP for these developing nations. And that's a huge loss when you consider that, that chunk of change could go towards, dealing with some other development challenges.
So it's really not just an issue of loss of life, but it really does start to impact some of the other SDGs and some of the other development issues.
Precisely.
Interesting. With there being such a broad set of challenges, have there been proven road safety measures that can be taken to save lives? Oh,
yeah. Thankfully, there are lots of proven measures that you can take. Just a few days ago, we were celebrating as a global community 50 years of safety belts, the seat belts. And that's a measure that, has saved a whole ton of lives, millions of lives. When you look at Europe, for example, we see that between 2000 and 2010, we got about 20% reduction in road traffic fatalities in Europe alone. And this is because of legislation around use of safety belts. This is around enforcement of the use of it, both in the front and in the back. So there are other road safety measures that you can take as well, making sure that you design roads in a safe, smart way, making sure that vehicles are safe to operate on the roads, making sure that you have effective post-crash care. So if there's an accident that happens, what's happening in that first hour, in the first couple of minutes? How fast are the responders there, and are they giving you quality care? So there are lots of issues that, if you implement them right, you can prevent either loss of life or loss of limb, loss of livelihood.
That's it. So, can you talk us through some of the fund's own road safety initiatives along those lines? Like, what are some of the projects you guys are?
Well, so road safety, it's one of those complex, multifaceted things. It's not just a silver bullet kind of approach. And so our projects are reflecting that. Today, after 5 years, we've got 44 projects covering 60 countries. And there's a diverse range of support that we're providing there. So when you look at what we're doing in Africa, in West Africa, for example, we've helped the 15 West African states who are members of ECOWAS to adopt harmonized regulation around the importation of used vehicles. We were part of funding some studies which showed that the cars that were coming into West Africa, and it's a problem in the developing world, were really unsafe, also pollutant. And so we helped the governments there to introduce regulations and legislation around how they import used vehicles by having a minimum standard. But then if you go to Latin America and the Caribbean, we're doing a lot on looking at enforcement of the road traffic rules, focusing on speed, alcohol use, and other major risk factors that operate in that region. And every region you go to, you'll find different risk factors that are at play.
And which countries and regions right now are you most focused on? You mentioned Latin America and West Africa, but are there others?
So we're focusing where the road traffic incidents are the highest. So that's Africa. So we've got about 50% of our projects focusing on sub-Saharan Africa. But then closely following that is Asia Pacific. And there it's a different situation where we're focusing a lot more on driving licensing reform. We're looking at motorcycle use, helmet use. So different issues operating in Asia Pacific, but that's right up there in about 30% of our projects.
And where have you seen the most progress so far?
The most progress? Well, obviously, Europe is the safest region. I mean, they invest a lot in legislation, enforcement, public education, and public awareness, vehicle safety, and all the rest of it. Where we're working in the developing states, we see instances of progress of reform. So these are incremental based on the level of support that we can provide. So, in Arab region, for example, we're helping them to set up their first road safety observatory. Now, use of data, accessing data, analyzing road crash data is critical for you to make informed decisions around policy and legislation. And that's something that we've supported in the Arab region. We've also got, other examples.
Sure. And why, we've talked about these important issues and how they're broad-reaching. Why don't you think more people are talking about these types of issues? What do you think the roadblock there is?
Yeah, it's this hidden or special envoy for road safety, Mr. Jean Todt. He calls it an epidemic. It's a hidden epidemic because this is a situation that is affecting every single person on the planet, but we don't really think top of mind about it as this great significant contributor to global mortality, which it is. It's a huge public issue. I think. When you think about the fact that you've got diseases that are more known, like malaria or HIV/AIDS or tuberculosis, I mean, those are more known, but the global road traffic injuries, they're causing more deaths than these known diseases. So there is this lack of awareness around just how the magnitude of the situation.
Okay. So if people aren't seeing road safety as a global development priority, I imagine this has a crippling effect on the UN's ability to fundraise for capacity building projects and to advise the countries that you advise on road safety issues. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine that there is a general lack of awareness about the magnitude of the problem, it is having an impact on the funding. So there's a significant funding gap at the global level where the UN is operating, but also at national level. So if you take the UN Road Safety Fund, for example, we are launching annual call for proposals where we're responding to the country needs at a scale of about $4 million each year. So that means that every year between, I would say, 80 to 90 proposals don't get funded just because we don't have enough funding to respond to these very basic road safety needs. And we're looking at, soft things like how do you do a legislation or how do you design a school, a safe school zone? How do you set, good enforcement protocols in place for the road traffic officers? So these are basic things, but we just don't have enough funding to respond to all the needs of the countries.
Wow. So when we think about why you're here at CANS, like we were talking about these important issues, but why do you think CANS is a good platform to come and help raise awareness about road safety?
Well, that's, for me, I see road safety, global road safety, as one of the biggest creative campaign challenges that exist today. Mm-hmm. It's something that affects every single person on the planet, has massive implications for SDGs, is highly preventable. Mm-hmm. So we have the solution. And so this calls for really, how do we get creative giants on board? How do we get brands with their influence and their power on board? And Cannes Lions is just an excellent place to have access to that kind of cross-pollination of ideas, creativity, to help make a difference on this issue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting when we think about getting the creatives and getting the brands involved. Whether you're a brand, like you said, it impacts everybody.
Yeah.
But brands themselves, they have supply chain. So there's probably a truck involved at some point.
Yep.
What are they doing themselves in terms of implementing safety in their procedures and in their everyday business? And it seems like we could make a case to almost any brand that has a developed ESG strategy about why this matters to them and why this should be something that they should support. That's interesting to think about. Maybe that's something we can come out of Cannes and continue to talk about.
That would be great.
Yeah,
that would be great.
That sort of falls within Public's wheelhouse for sure. So what's the most important message you'd want to leave with the folks here at Cannes?
Join the UN Road Safety Fund, join the UN to help us to reshape the narrative around this hidden epidemic. Mm-hmm. Bring your creativity, bring your influence, bring your reach with consumers, and help us to make a difference.
I like that. If I'm trying to think a little bit about what a campaign might look like, or what we could start to think about, as we leave Cannes and as we continue to talk about the importance of road safety and how to raise awareness. I would put a call out there to brands and to agencies that might want to get involved, that might want to bring their resources to bear to help raise awareness around the issue. So I think that would be great to come out of here and continue that conversation and continue that idea. While you're here at Cannes, you're gonna hang around for a little while longer. Are you gonna try to meet with some brands? Are you gonna try to meet with some folks around here?
Yeah, I'd love to meet with some brand representatives here just to kind of share what we've been up to at the UN working on this issue and how they can get involved. There's a space for them, not only for their employees, but also for their consumers. They've got a big voice in the world. Most of these brands that are here at Cannes, we've got the biggest and the brightest and the best at Cannes Lions, so we want to take advantage of that when I'm here.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it, and hope you have success in that journey of talking to brands. And let's keep that conversation going and see if we can't help raise awareness for road safety.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with. Welcome back to the SDG Lounge at the Cannes Lions, the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. We're joined today with a legend of the Cannes Lions, Terry Savage. Terry was the chairman of the Cannes Lions for many, many, many years. He brought the SDGs to the Cannes Lions to begin with, the SDG Awards, the SDG Lions. He is one of the architects of bringing creativity and purpose together. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Terry.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm going to start just by asking you to share some success stories where creative projects have had a significant and lasting impact on specifically on the SDG community.
Look, I think the examples that you can pull, by their very nature, can be short term, and the important thing from my perspective is that you have the depth of work that is out there that is, in fact, reinforcing the message the whole way through. And I'll give you a great example. When we started SDG Lions, I think in my heart and mind, I'm thinking, well, if we get a couple of hundred entries, that will be fantastic. Well, this year there were close to 700 entries, and that really means that people are focusing more and more and more right across the board on addressing these issues. And I think that's the important thing, that we have the volume and the quality rolling out there so that other people follow. Now, one show also has an SDG award, which is another big international award. London International Awards, we have an SDG category subcategory in each of the categories. So I think it's a case of getting this body of work out there widely and often as we can. That's the most important element.
I think that's exactly right. But can you slightly? We'll go one step backward.
Sure.
And say and tell me, from your perspective, why was it so important to bring the SDGs to the Cannes Lions? And what does it mean, that the juncture between creativity and purpose and the greater good?
To me, it was important that the SDGs got exposure and the creative community got exposure, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that can create the great work that is going to make a difference. So the reality as it relates to creativity is most ideas are born drowning. Now, how often are you in a meeting and someone comes up with an idea, and then before they've got it out of their mouth, 6 other people are saying it won't work, and they don't give it the airplay to be able to fully develop into a real idea. So I thought getting the exposure to the creative community would inspire them to inspire other people by their actions. So I think that was the main focus at that point in time.
But you've been in the advertising industry for many years. What continues to drive you now?
Great creativity. I mean, I still, you know, if you watch a great film, you get excited. If you watch a great TV series, you get excited. When you see great creativity in any form, you can't help but get excited. And yeah, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And you know, it's rare, because the creative community operates in a void that means they have to be able to handle rejection, because their ideas can get rejected and rejected and rejected. Then their great idea actually gets changed and altered and committed down to another level. So I do admire these creative people, because they've got such resilience and persistence to keep pushing these ideas, and every so often they hit an absolute jackpot where one of those ideas can change the world. And that's what we're actually looking for. We're looking for that one great idea where all of a sudden the penny drops. Wow, if we don't do this, this is the consequence.
And so, like, just building on that, what skills do the creative community need, the creatives need, in order to really move in the purpose direction, in the SDG direction, in the sustainability direction?
Look, I think, and you did touch on that point earlier, I think there is a reality that business sees and understands that purpose has got to be a critical way forward for the consumers that they serve. If they do not have that awareness, then in time, their businesses will become less relevant. The issue, however, is we don't have time. And I think at this stage, they're increasingly looking at it, increasingly trying to address it, but the speed of which they can do it is sometimes not as fast as you would want. But if they don't do it, then they will have issue. And in fact, if you look at the winners of most award shows in the last 3 or 4 years, purpose of various shapes and forms plays a key and central role in many of the awards given. And brands love that on one hand, don't love it on the other, because sometimes it doesn't drive sales in the right way. But as it's related to the SDG issues, they know they've got to be part of this process, or ultimately they're going to hit a generation who just reject what they have to offer.
I think that's exactly right. I think that we're seeing more and more, especially with the younger generations, choosing brands intentionally with purpose in mind. So with 2 equal products, they will always choose the one with purpose, is what our studies show. So I think that the fact that you've seen this happening in the award shows, in the work that's being done, that it is across that work in some way or form, is very telling to what I think the private sector, the corporations are feeling from their consumers.
Sure.
So I think there's a sea change here a little bit, and I think we need to continuously drive that sea change. And what you've done to bring the SDGs to the Lions has been very, very critical to that. But I wonder if there's more that the creative community can be doing to drive that change. That it will come. That the change comes from them. Rather, can we get it to a situation where creative agencies are actually advising their clients about sustainability?
The truth is, I'm sure that is already happening. And it's not just the agencies, it will be the media agencies, it will be the consultancies, anyone that's interfacing with business today. If they are not advising their clients that they've got to address the sustainability goals and the issues around the sustainability goals, they're not doing the job that is required of them. What more can they do? Well, there is the balance. There's always the balance in any business. So they can push and push and push. But certainly when I speak to people within the industry, they all have a level of consciousness for their brands that they're working on, that they have to, in fact, do more and adopt it more. And this is one thing. It's a very cluttered marketplace. If I want to find how many water companies there are in Australia, it's not very many. If I want to find out how many water charities there are in Australia, there's a ton of them. Yeah. So you sometimes think, well, hang on, it's looking very cluttered, and how do you break through and how do you cut through? And probably most importantly, great creativity changes a lot. But in most instances, you still need media to actually drive that. I mean, you can have a fearless girl, and that gets a lot of free space and free media, but ultimately you need some sort of paid support somewhere across the track to be able to amplify the voice and the message, and that's a lot more difficult to get. So and I'm sure there's work here this week that's wonderfully creative, but doesn't actually get huge media exposure the way it needs to actually work its legs off.
you know, I mean, that's my life. I'm constantly searching for free media. That's what I do day in, day out. So I agree with you 100%. But you know, it is very much a part of it. But what do you think are the you know, what's the role of technology and digital and the new way of thinking, AI? What's the role of that in creativity, and how does that impact?
I think they're just platforms. And it doesn't matter sort of what the platform is. Work that is creative will have more impact and more effectiveness than work that isn't creative. Doesn't matter whether it's social, digital, whatever the platform is, you still need to have superior creativity. And even you know, short, sharp, repetitive ads, they can still have a creative edge to them that will make them better than if they don't have that creative edge.
And going back to kind of the SDG space, that sustainability space, or even purpose space, do you know kind of like a couple of examples that you can remember or that really shine out about organizations taking that stand through creativity, and that it actually kind of like had impact? Well,
I think brands like Unilever, almost across the board, have universally adopted the concept. Initially, I think it was around gender and female empowerment, and lately into more broad-based sustainability across the board. And they're a great example of a company that have understood the need to reflect their consumers' concerns through their products, and you'll see the odd execution, which in fact is excellent and does the job. But Unilever are one organisation that seems to be embracing it right across and making it part of their DNA. That's part of their DNA, full stop.
And that's really what should happen with every corporation.
That's what's got to happen with every corporation, because if it doesn't, we won't meet the goals. And you know, humans react wonderfully well to crises. But we don't react wonderfully well in trying to stop the crisis in the first place. But if we're really actually going to make the impact across, you know, 17 very, very diverse areas, brands have got to get behind it. Not just the tip of the iceberg. They've got to actually go right in every way. And it's not flipping a switch, because you've got so much you've got to do and change in your organisation in terms of thinking, in terms of development, but they've got to start to go on that journey to ensure that, in fact, their brands reflect the future of the planet on one hand, but the future of the consumers going forward on the other.
I think that's exactly right. I want to run past something that we heard this week here. We had Sir John Haggerty here, right. And he said that the creative industry needs to be sustainable themselves. Yep. And the way that they could be sustainable themselves is to create better work, because better work needs less resources, and that would actually make it sustainable. What do you think of this notion?
I think I am never going to disagree with Sir John Haggerty, right? I'm sure that's right. But you know what? Better work requires a lot of hard work. You've got clients leaning over you. You've got blood, sweat and tears. And the theory's nice, but the practicality is, you know, there are so many moving parts. So even if the intent is brilliant, if your budget suddenly cut by $400,000 and it changes from this sort of execution to that, there's nothing much you can do. But I think the sustainability element of what the industry needs to adopt is exactly what every company needs to adopt. You know, sort of be careful how you're travelling. You know, all of the fundamental issues that companies like Unilever have developed, the industry should be adopting, and it's not always easy. And that, you know, here it's you know, it's a reality. It's an event, and you can see kind of made an attempt in areas to be sustainable and show to be sustainable, but to do the full drill down, what have we got to have? You know, sort of a couple of islands disappearing in the Pacific, then we may start to realise and take seriously that hey, there's no going back here. We've got to act, and I think it's the smart companies and the smart industries that are going to act.
And the thing is that, you know, from where I sit, I can see that the solutions exist, the technology exists. What we need is scale, and the way that we get scale is by, first of all, the corporate, you know, the corporates taking it. But I feel that scale can come from the creative industry, because what we need from the United Nations is the ability to reach people, and so the creative industry for us has been a huge benefit of translating what we say into a language that people can understand and can reach many people. And I think that's critical. So there's a huge role to play here of that scaling up.
Sure.
And so if they walk the walk as well as, you know, as talking the talk themselves, I think that's going to go a long way.
And I think it will. And this is the point. You've got so many messages to get out there. Now, you just said to me that a lot of the solutions we already know. The United Nations may know them, but I'm not sure people out in the wider world do know them. And if I knew there was a solution to a particular problem, you're going to take that solution if it's going to help. But I'm not sure people know that a lot of the solutions are available, even though they're probably going to cost a little bit more. I think people broadly will be sympathetic to that if they think it's going to solve the problem. So it's just another complex message that you've got to get out in this very cluttered world, and I think that's an important. Well, they're all important. That's the problem, isn't it? They're all important.
They're all important, yes. But so let me get some free advice from you. How do we get that message out?
I think you've got to somehow get a universal campaign. And I know SAWA did this through their cinema campaigns for, I think, firstly the World Food Programme, then for you. You get global brands that are putting out work that is universal. They're putting out messages that are universal. And I would challenge, if I was in your shoes, I would challenge the big holding companies, the consultancies, to help develop that with resource behind, and not make it about lip service. I mean, agencies today, they get their best people from different brands within their networks and holding companies to satisfy the client's needs. And I think that same sort of approach needs to be taken. You need something that speaks to the whole world as it relates to what we're facing. And I would be working really hard to get that killer idea. You know, 1984, the Apple commercial, anyone that's seen it, remember, you need a 1984 in 2024.
Absolutely. What's your advice to kind of budding creatives, budding people who use communication in their daily lives in work? What's your advice to them on intentionally working to save the planet? Well, there's two factors. One, in what they do in their day-to-day life, and the consciousness of that. But the reality is a lot of creatives are younger people. So it's their natural heart ground that they understand, and they feel the pain of what is likely to happen a lot more severely than we feel the pain. Do we want children? Do we want to bring children into a planet that could be 3 degrees hotter and, you know, more prone to weather disaster? They're real conversation that people are having. And again, I think it's about mobilisation. These people are sympathetic to you, and you've got SDG awards here. You can do so much in terms of creating a desire within people to, in fact, come up with communication that's going to be real and meaningful. And
you know, you've only got so many people to help you do this. But the reality is you've got a receptive audience to do this, and you can drive the SDG awards at LAA or at Cannes, not rely on Cannes and the award shows to do it. And I think that would be helpful. You've got UN offices everywhere, so that can be an avenue as well. Because the more awards entries you get into these categories, it means the more brands and places that work is getting exposed, and that can only be to your benefit until the momentum gains and gains and gains, and we get real change happening.
We're almost close. We're very close to the end of our time here. What's your call to action? What would you say to the creative industry?
I wouldn't speak to the creative industry, because they will do if they are told to work on something. This is a choice brief, you know. My God, it's a beautiful white sheet of paper. You've got to talk to the people who run the organisations, who tell the creatives, this is the brief you've got to work on. So I would be aiming for the C-suite, for the CEOs, for the marketing directors, and saying to them, we need your help to produce greater creative work. And it's lovely to deal direct with the creatives in some of the little sort of, some of the awards you have in the young creative side of things, but the people that it will elicit real change are the bosses. It's always that way, and that's where I'd be focusing.
I wish we could continue our conversation, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll talk later on.
Okay.
And we are back. We are here with another two amazing speakers in the SDG Media Lounge that we are running. We have with us someone that I met last year and instantly fell in love with, Florian Weischel.
Yes.
I remember how to pronounce your name.
It's difficult. I'm sorry. Florian is okay.
Florian is the co-chairman of Weischel Media in Germany. Florian has been instrumental in driving the SDGs forward. He has had so much impact through cinema campaigns across the world, working with Sawa, working with others, and really is a very, very big friend of the United Nations, and we're so grateful for him. We also have with us Rupen Desai.
Yeah.
I said that right.
Perfect.
It's like 2 for 2. This never happens to me. CMO and venture partner at Unaterra. I'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
So look, I've been a marketeer, selling bananas, pineapples, shampoos, cars, banks in the past. And then I decided that unless there is a dramatic impact we are able to give to the capital market, as venture funds, as catalytic capital. So I am the venture partner and the CMO at Unaterra, where we are only investing in companies that accelerate sustainable technologies to help reach the SDGs faster than we're currently destined to reach, boss.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question to both of you now. Florian, maybe for you first. You know, it's the SDG Mid-point. You guys both know very well what the SDGs are and what we're trying to achieve. We're at a halfway point. We are halfway there, but as a very, very clever young delegate to the United Nations said 2 weeks ago, we're half there, but nowhere near half done. So we're falling behind. We're falling pretty massively behind. Why do you think that's happening?
I think there are two sides. On one side, I'm disappointed with the results so far, and I think the news that the Fortune 500 companies did not reduce their footprint substantially is a bad sign. On the other hand, I'm still optimistic because solutions do exist. They exist, but I think it's really about, as Rupen said, it's about it's the capital, it's the orientation. What's the target of companies and top executives? Where are they heading for? And if that's still only profit, then we won't make it.
Yeah. I look. Most businesses seem to be stuck between a language of growth that is still extractive. So it's profit for the shareholder at the cost of the planet, profit for the shareholder at the cost of society and people. And whilst, yes, they're all trying to have a parallel path of sustainability, it's still in the, can I do less harm? And so most companies are stuck between, I want to grow, which is extractive, and whilst I grow, can I do less harm, and therefore push the can down the road, and which is why the current year that we will reach SDGs is 2073. Governments equally have got probably, even though it's the best measure we have so far, it's an inaccurate measure called GDP. Because in the system of calculating our GDP, a dead tree has more value than a live one. Yeah? And therefore, unless we put people, planet, prosperity as a new financial model, whether it's at government level, at policy level, at business level, we will continue to face a world that it gets delayed and delayed and delayed further. So I'm less optimistic than Florian is, just because we still haven't figured the way to measure success that goes beyond profit for the shareholder and GDP for showing how countries are progressing at an economic level.
I mean, it's as if you're speaking my thoughts, because that's exactly right. I mean, we have to move beyond this idea of GDP. It's like it's fundamentally destroying our planet on a daily basis, and we somehow need to get these companies, these corporates, to understand the planetary boundaries. And we're living with the idea that we have 9 planets now rather than 1. This is the planetary boundary that is functioning within that GDP arena. And so how can we, like you said, you're less optimistic, but how would you change it? What do we need to do?
I would start putting a value. So right now we have a value of financial capital. And Milton Friedman started an era which we've been living for the last 50 years, unfortunate one, right, where the only objective of an organization was profit for the shareholder. Now imagine if we start, beyond the financial capital, start putting value on the planet capital companies use, the human capital companies use, the manufactured capital companies use, and suddenly start measuring a company's success on all of these capitals. Like, I'm sure there are companies who sell bottled water. If they were really paying for the water used from this planet, they'd be loss-making companies today, right? So if we are able to find a measurement and integrate that within success criteria, where people, planet, prosperity are all measured, not just financial return for the shareholder, then we will have change both from the governments, the policies needed, and the companies. I meet so many CEOs who know that, we won't change, but are stuck and interfere because they know they're going to lose their jobs if they don't deliver the first and the foremost thing, which is profit for the shareholder. So.
Profit for the shoulder, it just has to change. It's like, has to be profit for the shoulder and profit for the planet.
Yeah, both. I would pick on that because you know that we're running a farm in Germany, because I wanted to do something to beyond, let's say, theory, acting and showing that a change is possible and that there is an effect in changing the methods in farming, because farming accounts for the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions as the top 500 companies in the world, so which is bad. It's almost a third, and it's really bad. So we developed a model which we don't invent it, but we adopted it, that is regenerative. And that is not saving natural resources, it's restoring natural resources. And now we started training top executives and board members. They come on the farm, and we go with them for 2 days in seminars, and they work on the farm to understand the idea of regeneration. And I think that changes something in their minds, because I think you need a complete change in your mind to move away from those old standards and to adopt to new. And that's something that makes me optimistic, because I can see, okay, if they leave, there is a change, and we have to measure later on how they act and how they decide in their companies.
And I was so excited when outside you were telling me about this, because I think the regenerative mindset is probably the biggest opportunity of our time, and if we go without utilizing it, without capturing, without wanting to do something about it, we'll go 20 years later and give a planet that our children don't deserve. So this is a moment in time where I think, rather than thinking as a CEO, CMO, creative head, blah, 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 we need to start thinking as Papa, like I call it Papa Desai, right? What am I using my superpower in the world today, and what impact will it have on the planet my children are destined to live on? And if we could get that cultural change at the CEO, at the board level, as well as a measurement of success change, then I'll move to be much more optimistic, like Florian is.
Yeah. But I mean, can I add on something?
Absolutely.
Because we are all looking for doing something that has an impact, and in the right direction. That's also the same for my core business, which is cinema advertising. That's why we started with you, because we felt, okay, we have this powerful tool, and we have the ability to use it for the right purpose. And that makes me feel better as a human and as a company as well. And I think that's something that, I don't know what the percentage of companies, even media companies, is that understood the idea of just bring in their capital of media to make the change. It's so easy. It's so easy to do it. And once you get the right campaigns and you deliver the right campaigns, I think that can really drive the change in the mind of consumers as well. And some of the executives go also to cinemas, so we reach them via cinema as well.
I like the idea that you're in media, right? And the media is a delivery method. It's basically getting that message to the right people. And here you're looking at two different ways of delivering the message. One is a personal experience on your farm with like C-suite executives that come to you, and you do workshops with them. And I love that idea, because in a way that's top down, and they'll go back to their companies and they'll think about regenerative farming, and then they'll think about sustainability, and then they'll think about the climate, and then it will perpetuate throughout their organization. And then on the other hand, you have cinema, which is definitely bottom up, and you're doing the same message there. So I think this combination is very, very important. What's the role of media in all of this?
I think change is nothing that will happen, in front of your mind. It happens more in the back. It is about emotion. It's not really to fully understand what's happening. I mean, it's not a disadvantage to understand what's happening, but I think for making a change in your mind and in your behavior, you need a very strong emotion. And that can be delivered through media, because people can do an experience in that. And the more, let's say, the more immersive a medium is, the more likely it is that it can drive change. And I think that is something, it's really, if you have the ability to use it, then use it. God damn, it's not that difficult.
Florian, imagine, so I think statistically there are probably more bad relationships in the world than good relationships in the world. But the way, culturally, we were sold love, in films, in entertainment, we have to find a way to sell planet optimism. Right, because climate doomism is probably going to be as harmful as climate deniability. And
Absolutely.
imagine, I get excited. We're at the
Yeah.
Festival of Creativity,
Yeah.
right? We see all this amazing thing. Imagine if we could sell climate optimism in the same way love has been sold to us through culture.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've been thinking about that a lot in the last few months. I believe that there's a problem with exactly that, with the communication around the emergencies, with the communication around the emergency in climate, in the emergency in nature, and the problem is that we use wrong words, we define it wrong, but we're also kind of constantly leaning into the negative rather than leaning into the positive.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you say is so precise, that we need to find almost a new narrative for it.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think 99% of the people in most countries are aware of the climate crisis, so they are aware of it, and it's frightening to them. It's frightening to you, to me, to you, to everyone. So the more you communicate, let's say, the dramatic side of it, the less people are willing to change something, because they're frightened and then they're stuck. They're stuck, they stand still, and they're not able to move towards the right direction. And this is why I think we agree in that you need a perspective. Even in the communication, you need a perspective for people to say, yes, we can solve it. We can contribute to something that moves the things into the right direction, and we are able to solve it. Otherwise, forget it, lay back, have a beer, and forget all about it. And that's not what we want. We want the people to stand up and to move. And I think you need to have, let's say, you have the feeling and the trust that this can be done. Otherwise,
I want to go back to what you were saying about love, because when I think about it, you're a much better person than me. But I think about the Second World War and how the world galvanized in the Second World War, and every citizen in the free world, let's say, had a role to play. You that poster of Rosie, the
we
ratchet.
can do it.
And that was the spirit of we can do it, we will do it, we will defeat, we will win. And so that's what we need right now, but we're not getting it.
Yes,
There's a disconnect.
yeah.
I think the leaders, and each one of us in our own respective ways is leading through some superpower.
Yeah.
And I think we as leaders need to have that galvanizing, motivating, uplifting, because what worked in what you just defined was every human knew they had a role in it.
Yeah.
So the groundswell happened because everybody had to get on with it. And I think what we might be missing, okay, and what we might need to move to is every small act makes you a climate champion, not just Boaz, because Boaz has dedicated his entire life to it, or Florian, or, so somehow, if we can, I dream of that dream where it just becomes saying everyone's a climate champion, because every small act, it works together.
Do you have any kind of inspirational works that you can think of, like Florian, like an inspirational, transformational work that you worked on, like that you're proud of, that could be inspiring to others?
Yes, I think this simple idea of regeneration is something, when you experience it, it works, because it makes people aware that already nature has so many solutions to offer for problems that we're facing right now. Just reach out for it. Have open senses and have an open mind, and grab on those ideas that have been developed by evolution for millions of years, and be careful in ignoring how these systems work. And it's quite easy to understand those systems, even they are very complex, but it is possible to understand them, and then you feel a bit better because you know really what's happening, and you know for yourself what can be done. What's your contribution?
I'll ask you the same question.
So yes, I have one that I'm genuinely proud of, and that was during my time as the CMO at Dole. Dole, as you know, doesn't make much. Mother Earth grows some amazing goodness of the earth, and Dole brings it to the world. But the problem with even the fruit business is we like pretty-looking fruit, so we start ignoring ugly-looking fruit. we've grown up in a culture where brown spots on a banana are thrown, not realizing they're the most nutritional part of it.
Yeah.
So as a company, we were committed to zero fruit loss, because we're a generation that wastes 1/3 of the food we grow. Pineapple leaves. So we, as Dole, as one of the largest manufacturers of pineapples in the world, were discarding the pineapple leaves, some of which would land up in landfills, causing methane, which is 20 times more harmful than carbon. And we said, we started with one simple thought, which is, what if we decided this wasn't waste? And partnering with a company called Ananas Anam, we were able to create vegan leather. Out of the leftover pineapple leaves, the farmer got more money, which they never did. The company made more money from leaves. Suddenly, we were starting to help scale vegan leather. Over the last year, 250 brands, including Nike, which made a pair of Happy Pineapple shoes, have been using vegan leather. And suddenly that entire regenerative mindset, where there's prosperity for the farmer, prosperity for the company, prosperity for the planet, suddenly came alive. So one piece of work over the last year that has been meaningful, helping me in my journey to become a better Papa Desai.
And I think this example has been awarded here as well.
Yes, we won the Grand Prix for business transformation last year. So yes, it was.
So, and that's communication.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, that's incredible. Yes. And how can you give us an example, Florian, of how your company engages with the SDGs, and how does that impact the employees of your company?
Yeah, first of all,
I'll ask you the same thing, Rupen.
The good thing about it is that we have a logo of the UN SDGs in front of our door in our office building, and we get lots of applications from young talents because of the cooperation with the UN. That's the first thing they pick up, and when they come for interviews, that's the first thing they discuss with us. So it is a very good signal, and is a very important signal for young people. So that makes me optimistic too, because they really pick up on that. That's one thing. And we try to encourage them to do something out of their engagement. So we, let's say, if they have an interest in a specific issue, we try to help them to bring in, let's say, their expertise or their knowledge or their energy to help this issue becoming better. Or if they support, let's say, a local little organization, we help them, okay, we'll give you the time and we'll give you also money to support it and make something out of it. And bring it back to us and share it with your colleagues. So this is a joint effort. It's not our decision as the shareholders of the company. It's not only our decision. It's a common decision of all members of our company.
Lovely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's more than most do, and we hope that many will follow you.
But your logo helps.
Rupen, what about you?
Yeah, I think at two levels. I think people increasingly want to join companies where they can live their personal purpose with that of the company, and the SDGs help actually make sure that they understand that this is a purposeful company. Okay, I think we've prioritized some of them that we can affect through the superpower of a catalytic capital, a venture fund, and therefore the only thing we're trying to do, literally, the only thing Unaterra is trying to do is make sure we put capital behind technologies that can help one or all of the 17 accelerate faster. So I think none of us should live with the number of, the only year we seem to be trying to reach the SDG right now is 2073, or that the world overshoot today is in July, and we're all operating on two Earths needed, which we don't have. So they are our North Star, they are our guiding light, and we are the foot soldier for the movement the UN is on. Yeah.
We only have a few. I would wish we could continue talking all day, but our time is almost up. What's your call to action to the Conlines, to the industry when you're here today?
Bring in your abilities to help. That's it.
The greater good.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, of course. Yeah.
What about you?
I think it is the best creative brief in the world. So the Festival of Creativity, the simple message is, bring your superpower to one client and one client only, which is planet Earth. And I took that from one of the things I saw at the party that I attended on Tuesday. So there is one client, the most exciting brief, which is reaching the SDGs faster. There's no better creative brief in the world. So, I mean, every Grand Prix should be awarded to help achieve the SDGs.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that we'll continue the kind of conversations elsewhere.
Yes, please.
Thank you
very
for
much,
having
both.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
My head was.
I've got big hair.
All right. Hello. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the final panel of the United Nations SDG Lounge at Cannes Lions. My name is Stephen Keppel. I'm the president of Public Foundation and a partner of this great event this week. As we're closing out 4 days of amazing sessions discussing collaboration between the public and private sector, the important role of the creative sector as we work towards mobilizing efforts to achieve the SDGs. I'm thrilled to welcome our following guests. We have Marina Ponte, Global Director of the United Nations SDG Action Campaign, Marissa Thomas, Chief Marketing Officer for Good Loop, and Tourism Australia's Chief Marketing Officer, Susan Cokill.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Really, excited about this conversation.
Very excited.
It's the last one of a very busy week here, so I'm sure it's going to be interesting and impactful. Let's start with you, Marina. Your work as the Global Director of the UN SDG Action Campaign has been already extremely impactful since the launch of the SDGs in 2015. As we're at the midpoint to achieving the SDGs by 2030, please tell us a bit more about the approach that you have taken and how you're able to engage so many stakeholders to adopt and amplify your campaigns.
So thank you. I mean, we are at the midpoint, and over the past year, we've been growing a movement of people and institutions to create really pressure and to inspire people to take action. So the key element for us is to convey the message that achieving the SDG is still possible, to convey a message to people that the power is in our hands to start the change, and to inspire institutions to really raise the ambition. And we've done it with campaigns throughout the year, open source, so then people can join at any point of time. And then we ask people to mobilize and come together in September when leaders come together at the UN. So that's our peak point. Last year we mobilized 142 million people in action from 200 countries. And this year we want to do more.
Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah, and as you said, we're at the midpoint. Now is the time for action if we're going to meet these goals by 2030. Marissa, please tell us about Good Loop, the concept in general, and how it goes about choosing support.
Sure. So Good Loop was started from the idea that in advertising, the creative is often where the purpose is. That's where you place your values. But 90% of traditionally what goes into a marketing campaign, 10% is the creative and 90% is the media around it. And no one's looking at how you can do better with that. So about 7 years ago, we started, and the idea was quite simple. Like, how could you take that media budget, the hundreds of millions that's spent there, and divert it to better causes? So we do that in two ways now today, through ad formats and media measurement. The ad formats are really simple. It's a watch to donate format. So you as a viewer watch the ad in exchange for unlocking a donation, and we partner with brands and good causes to do that. Second to that, we now have a carbon measurement tool. So the same thing, like all of the actions that are actually quite simple to take, and if you take your digital media, there's loads of emission wastage there. We have a tag that runs through all your digital advertising and helps you measure that, but crucially, actually take action from it. So make tangible changes during your campaign that can reduce the carbon emissions. That's good loop.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And now to Susan, in your role, you meet with sectors of all the travel industry, from airlines to government, hotel groups, cruises, all those sort of things.
Yes.
In your journey and the people you work with, is there an awareness of the SDGs? You know, the challenges that are happening. How are people talking about sustainability from all different sectors?
Yes. Thank you for having me today. I love being part of this panel. I would say that there is a very high awareness of sustainability as a key driver in tourism going forward. We see that in our research. People are choosing much more sustainable businesses. I would say, though, across the industry, and I'd say that in Australia and globally, there's probably a wide variety of levels of awareness of the SDG initiative itself. However, I see that as an incredible opportunity. I think you have a primed audience. I think we just need to see how we can turn around and rally the tourism industry behind the initiative specifically.
Yeah, great. No, big opportunity there, as you said, as we're in this midpoint and the drive to 2030. Marina, can you tell us a bit more about the SDG campaign United to Act?
Okay, so we're very excited. We're launching on the 3rd of July. So you can see some bracelet here. The whole concept is about the idea of being united. And the creative concept behind is about moving from the lines seen as a negative. So there are the line dividing, segregating countries, segregating people, the lines that you see on the field because of climate change, the line on the sky after trailing planes, and then the SDG call on the lines to wane and become a ribbon of unity. And for us, being united doesn't mean that everybody think or is doing the same thing. It means that we, in our diversity, we feel of a belonging, and then working together in a togetherness to build a more sustainable, inclusive future. So this is the concept, and the activation will be in September, you know, when leaders come together for the summit, so that we can raise their ambition of the action that they're going to agree upon.
And what's the role of kind of media and creativity in that campaign?
The role of creativity is critical, because people will never change or will never change a behavior only by fact. So you can use fact, but people will change when not only when their mind is touched, but when their heart is touched. So when you want to achieve change, you need to combine fact and you need to touch the heart. And art and creativity are essential. So we always use creativity, the creativity sector, and here we're in Cannes, you know, surrounded by, to really combine those aspects that are indispensable to achieve lasting change and to inspire change. People change because they're inspired, not only because they're scared.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of one of the sessions I saw here. The creative director was talking about it has to hit you in the feels, right? You have to feel it.
Yes.
And that helps inspire you to act. So, no, I love that. And Marissa, talking about, you know, the feels, the inspiration, we hear a lot about the power of storytelling in the world of campaigns and marketing. And what makes a powerful story for you, and what is the secret then of like mobilizing people for good?
I think, like you touched on it, right? It's this the fact needs to exist to maybe give you the insight of the story you need to tell, but that getting into the feels, the recipe, I think it is really hard. And that's because you've kind of got to go off of a few different responses. Like, do you make people feel like there's an urgency, which often means that you have to use tactics like fear, which can be quite difficult. People can shut down from it. Or do you try to inspire through a story that might kind of show struggle? And that also, like, it can go both ways. And I think over the last few years, we're starting to see this kind of shift from maybe these kind of doom stories that definitely like capture your attention, but maybe they haven't got us to action yet, through to trying to find ways to really bring it back to what is that impact for you and what could you do as an individual. It's interesting. My role, I advertise to advertisers, right? And so it kind of, you can feel like, oh, they already know, so you don't have to be as creative. You have to be 10 times more creative because they're all thinking about how they can get the consumer to be inspired and act, whereas our job is how can we get the advertiser to act across all of these areas. And kind of that recipe of storytelling is exactly the same thing, like understanding the humanness of everybody and trying to be really compassionate, and instead of kind of getting up on a platform and telling a big story that makes people feel like, wow, we should do something, but that's really impossible. Like, you're inspired, but you don't go anywhere. And instead, kind of creating these examples and real stories of when people have done something in a small way, it's created a big change.
Can I just build on that thought as well? Because for me, I think it's also a bit about normalizing things as well. So just so setting a standard, so making sure that you are showing the behaviors, you're showing the options. So whether it's in the way that they do production, whether it's for us, it isn't always about an overt sustainability message, but we try and make sure that we are also always focusing on or heroing operators who really do focus on different types, different facets of sustainability as well. So that starts to become the bar for businesses who would want to work with us and want us to promote them through our marketing as well. So I feel like it is selling the dream, it's telling the emotive story, but it's also, I think, about normalizing the types of behavior and choices that people should be making.
Definitely.
And showing, highlighting the individual, you know, in this case, and sometimes it doesn't, it's the small action that leads to bigger things. Susan, when I think about the SDGs and tourism, I think about ecotourism.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about that, about the market for ecotourism?
Yeah.
Is that becoming more part of your marketing message in general, and how do you see that across the industry?
Look, firstly, I think I'd say that sustainability for us is much broader than just ecotourism, and we do try and think about it more broadly, whether it is promoting indigenous travel or, I mean, for us, regional tourism, regional dispersal is incredibly important. That is the lifeblood of so many of our regional economies. So making sure that the industry is economically viable and contributing to the local communities is really important. But I would also say, in 2023, in a sort of post-bushfire world, which we obviously had in Australia in 2019 and 2020, and we saw, horribly in Europe and recently in Canada in recent months as well, I think travelers in general are much more aware of the impact of the choices that they make in their holidays, and are wanting to make better choices, to be more conscious about where they go and what they do and how they contribute. So that may be about where they choose to stay. It may be the type of holiday, whether it's conservation travel, for example, being able to give back in their travel. All of these things are starting to emerge as themes. And I think also, in a post-pandemic world, people are looking for much more meaningful travel opportunities as well. So that is about connecting. I mean, for us in Australia, we are so incredibly lucky that we have the world's oldest living culture in Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations in Australia, and the opportunity to connect with that type of culture, that type of history is incredibly important and unique. And again, that just, it does two things. I think it brings economic benefit to those communities, and it also, brings a much greater focus on Aboriginal culture in general in Australia as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think you're right. It's, as we have this conversation about SDG sustainability, it's really interesting to see how it impacts, specific industries, in your case, tourism. Marina, I want to go back to you as we're here at Cannes Lions, the Festival of Creativity. You've been around meeting with people. How important are collaborations with the private sector and with the creative community to the work that you're doing and to the campaigns you're launching?
So for us, it's critical. I mean, we really, as I said before, we believe in the power of art and creativity, and we really believe in the power of the creative sector in general to leverage their access to communication, all the campaigns that are around, not just to sell product, but also to inspire change and to also promote impact. And then I was really inspired. I saw some of the prizes and some of the campaign that won, Cannes Lions, and I could say the 95% were not about selling a product, but were about addressing an issue, health, nutrition, and then inclusion. So I was really inspired, and if this could continue, and really if the creative industry could leverage, could use the excuse that they have to sell a product to really help us go through and help us build a better future, that would be amazing. But I was very inspired because so much has happened already.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of great energy in the creative community.
Just wanted to build on that.
Yeah, please do.
I think I couldn't agree more, and I think something that's really struck me this week, and I thought about it in different ways, and you hear about it in different ways, but one, that trend of like, yes, the stories that we're telling are trying to inspire action, but actually understanding that I saw Spike Lee talk this morning, right, who was a film director who then became a commercial director. And that connection between the culture that we see in media at large, TV, film, that inspires and sets the pace for what the status quo is to so many people, and the power of moving image, what it can do. Advertising sets the agenda more than you realize, and the more that what we decide should go into the creative, what stories we tell and what messages we choose to convey. Everything that's a step forward signals to those channels that want that advertising money that, okay, we can be a bit more progressive. We can talk about climate. We can talk about the rights of people that aren't represented by the mass populace, and it's so critical to actually driving forward a change that has everybody involved in it. And we have so much power to do it. And it's great to see the creativity coming out. I hope that impacts actually what gets shipped, like what shows end up on TV, and those things that then help inspire future generations as well as the existing ones to kind of imagine those possibilities.
Even just things as simple as casting, and casting's never simple, by the way, but but just making better choices. Remember, I live in Australia now, but I still remember from a few years ago the Cheerios ad showing an interracial couple or parents of a child, and it seems like the slightest, smallest thing, but it's so amazing for people to see themselves represented on screen. And we are trying to make sure that in our marketing as well that we are representing multicultural Australia, because we are one of the most multicultural countries in the world. But then also making sure that we are, including, accessible tourism, representation as well, which you'll see in an ad that we have coming out around the Women's World Cup, that we've got, a proper amount of diversity that represents, who we really are, the breadth of humanity.
Yeah.
And just 2 points. I think today, and for me was really a big surprise during this week, is that it's not only the advertising community, but now gaming and e-commerce. So the avenues of really interacting, educating, inspire people are now way more. And you talked about the diversity and looking at some of the prize winners. I saw a lot of diversity, and I'm not an expert in the past of Cannes, but I'm not sure the current diversity was also back then.
I think
I was really struck by that too.
I think it's extremely important, and everything you're saying, it's like what I'm taking in from this week and from your conversation is sometimes small changes that seem small, right, in our industries or in our day-to-day can have a big impact, particularly if they're seen by millions of people around the world, whether it's a UN campaign or whether it's an advertising campaign or it's how you think about, marketing tourism in Australia. It does have an effect, so much so that we remember it, as human beings. We're all human beings and are affected by creative content. So I think that's really interesting and beautiful. But we're coming to the close here, and I have one last question for you all. As we said at the start, we're halfway to 2030, which is when we're hoping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. and there's so much work to do. We've been behind because of COVID and other things. So now it's really about action. So I want to ask each of you, what is your call to action to people out there that are listening, that are watching? What can they do, to play a part in all this? And we'll start with you, Marina.
So it's still possible to achieve the SDG if everyone joins. There will be a campaign on the 3rd of July. They launch a toolkit, many actions that can be taken to culminate in September. Go to our website, Act for SDGs, and then join the movement.
Great. So 3rd of July, and
Yes.
check out Act for SDGs. Wonderful. Marissa.
I'd say, and off the back of this week and hearing a lot of conversation, it's like, okay, shush now, like act. It's really what it wants to be. And with that is set in place things to measure things on an individual level, at a business level, and then kind of go up from there, because it can feel daunting and starting to break things down in the same way as if you were cooking and you kind of look at a recipe and really break it down so that it feels measurable to you personally, so that you can share that with the people that you influence, so that they can influence more people. And maybe that starts with one, focus on where you think you can make the impact with an SDG goal, and really set some targets around it the same way, particularly in this industry, that we set targets around the reach of a campaign. Those tools are there. This toolkit sounds amazing, and then that should help with that acting and just less of the
Less of the talk.
Yeah,
we've been
fair
talking
point.
all week. Susan.
I probably looking at it through two lenses. One would be to our advertising industry as well. I echo 100% what you're saying. Make those incremental choices that help further us along in meeting the goals that you've set out. And then I guess from a travel and tourism, I have to look at it through the lens of my industry, of course. Yeah. And that's about being choiceful, I guess, in your holiday planning and where you go, how you get there. I look at what Qantas is doing. So our national carrier, for example, they've created a green status, a green tier status for their frequent flyers, for example. So they reward people, travelers who are making, decisions around sustainability in their travel. So find your airline partners, find your hotels, that are taking care of the environment around them. Make sure that you are also, investing in experiences with, from my perspective, our indigenous community is so important. It's a wonderful way to connect, but it's a wonderful way to drive economic development for them. And I know you said earlier that you want to come to Australia, so let's make sure we talk about your itinerary.
I was going to mention that. I love that, because everything we do, whether it's, in advertising or the choices we make around travel, we can do so in a way that impacts sustainability. And yes, I will be coming to Australia.
Amazing.
It's in the works. It's on the short list. So we got to make it happen. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been a real pleasure to host this panel. I want to also take a minute to thank all of the great guests that we've had this week. It's been an amazing week here at Cannes Lions for those who've appeared at the United Nations SDG Lounge. It's been a week of building and fostering great partnerships across all industries to move the needle, and there's a big job ahead of us. We talked about the midpoint. We've got a short amount of time to take action, and we need to make sure that we do it. I also want to think there's an amazing production team that's behind the scenes. You don't see them here. They're back there. Thank you all for everything you've done to make this week seamless and impactful. And finally, on behalf of the United Nations Development Program, on behalf of Public Foundation, Deloitte Digital, I thank you for watching us. A special thanks goes out to our broadcast partners, our streaming partners at We Don't Have Time. Thank you for spending time with us today and all this week and paying attention to the conversation we're having, thinking about the SDGs. We've talked a lot this week. Now's the time to act. So thank you very much.